By the name of Almighty Allah, who is the most merciful and the most beneficent. Assalamu alaikum to all the students. I am your instructor, Noshaba Faraz, for the course American Literature, and its course code is ENGL 4128. Students, my presentation it is based on the conclusions and the critical appreciations or discussions on the Frost's poem, and these are the specific poems which are included in your syllabus, and like Acquainted with the Night, Birches, The Death of the Hired Man, Nothing Gold Can Stay, Mending Walls, and The Road Not Taken. As it is well said that poetry that sings and poetry that talks, and his poems are people talking, and we will come to know about all these, that how the poetry of Robert Frost it sings and it becomes a melodious symphony for the learners as well as the listeners or readers, and how his poetry talks about how his poetry is just like conversation, and we will just come to know after going through the conclusions and discussions on the Frost poems. Okay, now we have to move forward. As we all know that Robert Frost is a 20th century poet who deals realistically with his world through man and nature. Frost is still widely thought of as a nature poet, but this is a misconception. Although most of his poems are filled with nature images, his real subject is humanity. Frost admitted that he had only 3 or 4 pure nature poems, and the rest were human portraits with a nature setting. So, he had been a 20th century poet, and he is not at all considered as a poet of the nature, although we just come to know in almost all of the poems he deals with the natural objects and he talks about the nature, but he himself claims that he is not a natural poet, because we may say that his poems usually include a moment of the interaction or encounter between a human speaker and a natural subject or phenomena. So he says that my subject is not only the nature, but it is about the connection between the nature and the speaker. And so these kind of encounters culminate in profound realization or revelations which have significant consequences for the speakers. So we may say that actively engaging with the nature, whether through manual labor or exploration, has a variety of the results, including self-knowledge and deeper understanding of the human conditions. And Frost's earlier works, they all focused on the act of the discovery, and it all demonstrated how being engaged with nature, it may lead to the growth and knowledge. We have to discuss all the Robert's poems with critical perspective, and we might be able to come to know that what kind of the style it is used by the Frost, and how his poetry deals with the melancholic aspects, and how his readers may experiences the experience of the Robert Frost, and through his poetry you might be able to know that how his poetry it might have alternative perspectives for various readers, because all the people they may interpret his own poetry in very different perspectives, and it becomes very interesting that his poetry it has many insights for the wise people. So if we just go through the Robert Frost's poem, we just come to know that he takes us on a journey through which we first encounter his poems as light-hearted and simple, though as we look deeper. And he also leads us to see a profound and more thought-provoking meaning to his work. Although the language Frost uses is simple and accessible, his careful use of the words allows for there always to be a deeper meaning to his poetry than what initially meets the eye. And the ideas of deeper insights is disguised by simpler topics. And we just discuss all of his poems one by one, and it will give you a chance to recall all the ideas which had been elaborated by him in his poems, or we will just discuss with respect to the 6 poems which you have already gone through, and we will just come to know that the deeper insights they're disguised in the very simpler topics, just like the mending wall, and we are just going to take the start with the mending wall, and with one by one we will discuss all the poems, we will just conclude them, and we will have a discussion with the critical perspectives as well. Mending Wall appears to be about mundane farm work, and yet, like many of Frost's poems, the meaning runs much deeper than this. And how? Because this poem it has two levels. On one level, we may say the poem describes a country scene where a wall needs to be repaired. And on the other hand, it also describes the farmer's pride in the wisdom passed down to him by his father. And so that's why he explores also stubbornness in a conservative farmer who blindly follows tradition. On a deeper level, Mending Wall examines how humans deal with each other and they live isolated lives. And so it becomes quite philosophic because we may say it propagates the two point of views. And because when the speaker questions his neighbor about the purpose of the wall, he simply responds with his father's old saying, and he says, "Good fences make good neighbors." And this becomes his mantra and the only words we hear from him. And but the speaker wants to know why good fences make good neighbors, and he's quite curious, and he becomes deflective and inquiring. And but the neighbor is quite opposite to him, and he's unreflective, and he just parrots back the same phrase again and again, and he says, "Good fences make good neighbors." And this becomes the poem's central image. And the speaker explores the reasons that why people create boundaries around themselves. And he believes that building a wall can give offense or alienate one's neighbor. So here we may say two types. Throughout this poem, Mending Wall, we feel that Frost is subtly comparing the differences between the two types of people in this world. Although Frost uses humor while making his comparisons, he is all pine and I am apple orchard. Actually, he tells us that he is talking about the two people who have quite different point of views about the world. They have different rituals, they have different traditions to follow. As the neighbor, he insists upon repairing the wall, and because the ritual of repair is a tradition, and the poem's opening lines as tell us that something there is that does not love a wall. So it implies that walls are unnatural, and that the vague something is a force of nature that destroys the walls people build among themselves. And here we can say the speaker who wants to just motivate the neighbor, and he just want to tell him that it is a time to mend the wall. And but the neighbor, he does not follow him because he is over there in order to challenge the tradition. And the speaker is over there to challenge the tradition, but his neighbor, he cannot break away from the custom of maintaining the fences between the people. He cherished the traditions his father once carried out. And although here he had been, or the speaker, he was just telling him, and he was trying to motivate him, and he was telling him that he moves in the darkness. And actually, this is the darkness of the blindly following custom without considering why we do so. So, what happens? That some of the people, they just follow the traditions of their forefathers, and they do not think about them, that why they are going to follow them. And so actually the speaker wants to tell us that the neighbor, maybe he was wanted to just follow the custom, but actually he was trying to tease his neighbor, because he was over there, and the neighbor, he tries to tease his neighbor into looking below the surface of his father's word to ask why good fences make good neighbors. But the neighbor, he prefers simply to follow the tradition for his own sake. He had no other logical interpretation in order to give to the speaker, and but he only said, because he just he's over there, he is stuck to his own point of view because he has to follow the tradition of his forefathers. So we may say that this poem, Frost, he just warns us of the danger of a closed mindset and cutting ourselves off from others. And when he says he moves in darkness, it means that he is blindly following the traditions of his own forefathers. And so this brings the element of the mystery or magic in this poem. And this all it creates a sense of the intrigue and further engages the reader, and the reader they become very involved in all this conversation, because it is quite very near to the reality, because all the people who are around us, and even we may say the people who are just living in one house, whether they are the siblings or they are your mother and father, they do have their own personal point of views, and they do have their own logics, just like the two people who are conversating here in this poem Mending Walls. So this poem Mending Wall, it is not just discussing the boundary walls on only form, but actually these boundary walls they are hinting at the need of for us to remove international barriers and borders and embrace multiculturalism, embrace our differences. So there is the need that we have to be quite respectful, because the whole village it has become now a global village. So that's why we have to prefer to be multicultural. We do not have to negate or degrade any other cultures or other traditions or rituals, but we have to embrace our differences. Because we may say that although this poem it was written in 1930, but it is incredibly relevant in today's world, because now today it is the need of the time, that we have to get together, we have to welcome all the traditions, we have to follow all the rituals, because still we are constantly torn between wanting to break down barriers yet feeling obliged to build them back up again. So it is not actually the talk about mending the wall. Actually, it is a talk about mending all the barriers which have we have been created. We have been creating for the years, and there are the barriers not only at the international level but the national level as well. We have many oppositions in all the matters, whether regarding politics, whether regarding our own institutional at the institutional levels, in our own traditions, in our rituals, or in our culture. So there are many things that we have to accept, and this thing it tells us, and this poem it just gives us a very strong message that we have to follow all the things. Whatever is good we have to accept it, and whatever is not good we have to compromise on that, and we have to build all the things which are going to deteriorate. They might be the traditions, they might be the relations even in our own societies, so we have to mend all of them. And now we talk about Acquainted with the Night, and it is a sonnet which is written in terza rima. It is a rhyme scheme, and it follows the complex pattern like A B A B C B C D C D A D A A, and actually this terza rima it was invented by the Italian poet Dante Alighieri for his epic poem The Divine Comedy, and it was easy to use in Italian language, but actually as far as the English is concerned, so have different vowel endings, so it becomes quite difficult to use in the English language. But American writers they have been attempting it in order to create their poems. And Robert Frost, he was a master of many forms, and he used this terza rima in Acquainted with the Night. And this poem it is written in strict iambic pentameter, and use of metaphors we may find out over here as one luminary clock against the sky. So he uses this metaphor for the moon, and the author he also uses lexical repetition to emphasize a single image. He repeats the I sound for his own self, or whenever the poet has to emphasize on the any vocabulary item, just like I. Same word is getting repeated here in this poem again and again. It means that he wants to emphasize on it. He just wants to begin, and this characteristic it is taken as the anaphora, or use of the anaphora, because in this poem he just takes the start and he says that I have been one acquainted with the night, I have walked out, I have outwalked, I have looked down, I have passed by, I have stood still, or again he at the end he again uses the same line and he says that I have been one acquainted with the night. So this repetition or repetitive use of I, it is the use of the anaphora. So this poem, Acquainted with the Night, it starts with the speaker's feelings that he relates about his loneliness, his isolation through the imagery of the setting. So he takes the start of the poem by the lines that I have been one acquainted with the night. I have walked out in rain and back in rain. Actually, he wants to tell us that he is quite familiar with the night. He used to stroll through the streets in the rain. So he talks about his own loneliness. He walks in the isolated city streets. He walks in the rain. I mean, whatever the circumstances had been over there, he had been moving on. I mean, he had been just walking, and he had been encountering all the depressions and all the sorrows and all the hard times of his own life, and he keeps on walking. When he talks about the walking throughout the poem, the speaker talks about his walking in the city at the night time. It might be interpreted in many ways. I mean, you may take or you may consider this night time as a hard time, and you may take his walking as symbolic, as a very symbolic that he just kept on moving. He just encountered all the depressions. He encountered all the problems of his own life. So he carried on, he just kept on, continued his own all living, and despite unhappy circumstances that had been surrounded, that he had been surrounded by. So you may interpret this rain also as the time that he had been surrounded by the problems, and I mean, it just depends upon the readers that how you may interpret it. So he just talks about his loneliness, he talks about his own problems, he talks about his own depressions, and he also gives us a hope, a ray of hope. We just take that he was quite hopeful even during all these critical circumstances. The speaker mentions the distance in the poem, as we just came to know in the second stanza as well, that he was avoiding to talk to the watchman, and he was unwilling to explain. He was quite unwilling to explain me. He just talked about the distance, or he just wanted to have the distance from not only from the other people but also from the objects as well. And he did not want to get engaged in the communication with the watchman, and in the same manner he says that I had been at a great distance from the objects as well, not only from the human beings, as when he says that between him and moon there had been the distance, a lot of the distance, or the distance, and he covers when walking at night, or the distance cry he hears. And the distance is symbolic of the mental distance between the narrator and the world, and he feels lonely, disconnected and unhappy. So when he was relating that he was just wandering and loitering in the streets, and he just passed by the watchman, and he was unwilling to explain, so he just elaborated that he was at a distance from the human beings. And then he says that he was at a far away from an interrupted cry. Mean, here again a distance comes over here. Mean, he was not at all involved in the activities whatever was happening around him, and he was not a part of all that thing, or he just wanted to get at a distance. He wanted to live an isolated and lonely life. So he just tells us about his own life, that he was quite disconnected, he was quite unhappy, and he was leading a lonely life. Robert Frost, he talks about the night, and he talks about the darkness. When he says that I have been one acquainted with the night, it means he had been quite familiar with the darkness, and he was quite alone, he was quite depressed. So here the night or the darkness, it is a symbol. So it is a symbol of his loneliness, his depression, his problems, whatever he had been facing in the life. And the moon, here it is also related over here, and further still at an earthly height, a luminary clock against the sky proclaimed the time was neither wrong nor right. So when he talks about the moon actually it is a source of the light. So we may say it is a ray of hope. And in this darkness, in this loneliness, in this depression, in this isolation, so there had been a ray of the hope. But it is quite surprising that it was at a far distance from him. So you may say that it stands for the glimmer, it stands for the moon, it also stands for the hope, it stands for the light. We may say it's just kind of the guide towards the light of the life. So he was just having a look on that, and but he also tells us that it was quite at a distance. So we may say he was not at all hopeful, and he was just sharing with us that he has very less chances of the hope in order to live a happy life. So, acquainted with the night, it is quite an easier poem to understand for the readers, and we may hold many of our interpretations according to our own perceptions. And so there are the many ways in order to interpret, and it all depends upon our own emotions at that time, or the situations we may be in, and our surroundings at the time too sometimes. And the night may be a fascinating time to think, to hear our own thoughts. And same happens with Robert Frost, that at night time he just choose to walk in the streets, and he just wants to feel the depression and as well as the melancholy of his own life. And sometimes this night feels strange for him as well. And all these experiences and all these feelings, they are all dependent upon the emotions of the reader. As the Robert Frost, he also treated this acquainted with the night in a very personal way, and he elaborated and shared his own personal thoughts with all of us, that he had been leading a very hard life, and he had been encountering many problems in his life, but there had been a ray of the hope, and but it was at a very distant distance. And so he had been leading the life, but he had been hopeful as well, that if there are the hard times, then they will go. And he also these are also his own words, and he says that let what will be. So he doesn't say that he wants to be an escapist, he doesn't want to go away from this hard life. And he says, although this is hard, but this we have to permit it, whatever is happening around us, we just have to get involved in it. If you're passing through the depression, so you have to be depressed, but with passage of time you will just go through them, as he also sees a ray of hope like a moon. And so he says that this depressing time, it will fly away. And I would like to relate here the thinkings or the critical perspective which is presented by the Carl Linder. And in his one of article, he just goes one step further, and he points out Robert Frost as a dark romantic, because he points out that Frost is not a mere romantic, but like Malvolio is a dark romantic. And so dark, we may interpret over here, we may infer that this dark, it is related to the depressed romantic person. So Linder maintains that the terror of the discovering truth and the sense of loss and uncertainty are dark aspects derived from the American romantic tradition upon which Frost leaned heavily. And if we just go through all of the poems, or we have to interpret, we will come to know that we might be able to infer there will be the sense of the loss, there will be the uncertainty, there will be the truths or the facts, and all these things, they just make the readers sad. And we may say that there is a sense of the melancholy which has prevailed over the poems of Robert Frost. That's why he had been considered as a dark romantic. And both Frost and Malvolio established man in a natural setting faced with uncertainty. So that it was the uncertainty that Frost, he had been depressed, and he was quite uncertain as well, because he was not hopeful, and he was of the view that he will have to pass through these hard times, and it will just stay over there for a long time. This poem, The Road Not Taken, it reflects the life and the society. And The Road Not Taken, it is a simple yet powerful piece of the poetry, and it is one of the Frost's shortest poems, but this does not limit the impact it has on the readers. And in this poem, Frost is describing the natural element to both the physical world around us as well as the natural course our lives take. The literal meaning of this poem by Robert Frost, it is pretty obvious, and he just wants to tell us that we are in the need to decide that which decisions we have to take in the life. So, if we just discuss its symbolic interpretation, then we come to know that the journey which the Frost embarks on along one road in the wood, it symbolizes the path he chose to take in life. And this poem is full of metaphors which add to its deep meaning. And look down to where it went in the undergrowth is a metaphor for how we can't see what is in our futures when we make our decisions. So we may say that the literal meaning of this poem, it is just represented as that it is the need of everybody to have the decisions in order to continue one's journey of the life, and it also offers a mental debate for the traveler who picks the road less traveled by. So the figurative meaning is not too hidden either, and this poem describes the tough choices people stand for when traveling the road of the life. And the changing view of the meaning of the path we take in life forces me us to think for ourselves and decide which we believe to be true for us. So there is a level of the inspiration to be gained from this poem, although the poet initially appears to be critical of his indecisiveness. Long I stood, and he comes to realize that this is part of what it is to be human. I shall be telling this with a sigh. So what happens is that this decision making, it is a challenging affair for every one of us, and we have to draw on wisdom, knowledge, and experience, to name a few, while making the choices. And there are also the moments come in our life that we feel hesitation, we get confused, and during the chaos and the retreat we try to arrive at some decisions, and the consequences of the choices are to be visualized and judged against all odds that may come our way. As he also says that for some time he says that long I stood, mean he also went through the times when he has to face the hesitation, he had to encounter the confusion, but he realized that which choice he has to take. And so we may say that this is a universal theme, and this is the universal phenomena that all the human beings, they have to pass through this phase of life any time during the life. This poem, it is quite thought-provoking, as it may lead the readers to ponder on the reality that we do not know what is ahead of us, and when we make decisions regarding our future, but we just have to hope that things will work out for the best. And the critics, they do agree about the thematic concerns of the road not taken, and they are less consistent in evaluating its success. And here the road, it is taken as a metaphor for the writerly life, and the choice the speaker makes here, it leads deeper into the wood. And we may say that this choice, which was taken by the writer, by the Robert Frost, it makes a difference. When he says in the last lines that I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. So we may become quite attracted to this idea, because we all are very familiar, and people or readers, they prefer the realistic one ideas, and so it becomes quite realistic and the relevant one, that the choices which we make in our lives for ourselves, they may make a difference. Because as Robert Frost, he just took here a decision that he has to take this decision, that what he has to do in the life, and he has to choose the life of the writer, and so it made a quite great difference in his life. So the same thing happens with all the readers, and they become very curious about it, that the decisions they have to take, they will even change their course of the life. So it becomes very important for all of us, and it just enhances all the realistic concerns of the human being. So this poem, The Road Not Taken, like many of Frost's poems, is layered with meanings and insights. And to me, the journey Frost embarks on along one road in the wood symbolizes the path he chose to take in life. And this poem is full of metaphors which add to its deep meaning. And look down to where we went in the undergrowth is a metaphor for how we can't see what is in our futures when we make our decisions. And so we may say that we may have many interpretations. So this journey, it might be the journey of one's life. It might be the journey of one person who is just searching for any good opportunities in the life. And so this journey might be the journey to get the success in the life. So this journey, it might be different for all the readers, and it may have a different symbolic meanings. And but this is very thought-provoking thing, and this is very striking element that all of we have to encounter in our life. That all of we people feel such kind of the situations in our life that we take the decisions, and the decisions, they play a very important role in our lives, and they may change our destinies as well.